When we were looking at invoicing, the original intent was for suppliers to upload invoices through the supplier portal in Procure to Pay. However, we've been seeing that a lot of suppliers aren't quite understanding how to do this process. And there have been some issues with them doing this process. And we don't have administrator access where we can look and see their screens to see where they're having issues or walk them through it or provide training like we do to you guys where we can demo something on that, because that's not an access the campus has. Suppliers are 100% managed by the chancellor's office team for Procure to Pay. So even to request a new supplier, we can initiate the request, but the actual invitation that is sent out by the supplier management team at the chancellor's office. So in discussing this with other campuses that have gone live with Procure to Pay, they do not recommend using the supplier portal for invoices. So they've have come across a lot of issues with that process. So now we're at where, how do we get the invoices right to AP so they can then process the payment? So they have the ability to pull invoices for the punch out catalog suppliers. So there's nothing that they need to be provided for them to process those payments. But for everything else that's not a punch out supplier, the recommendation is typically the invoices will go to requesters. A lot of times the vendors are going to send you their invoice for payment. So if you receive those invoices for payment from the vendors, then please add those as an attachment to the purchase order and then make a comment to Bethany Davis and Nashwa. Why am I blanking on her last name? Rafiq. Um, so that way they will know there's a pending invoice, and then they can make sure to work with the AP techs to get those invoices processed. Any questions on that process? I
Yeah,
know.
I'm definitely confused on what you just said. So normally in the old system, we get the invoice from the vendor, and then we would send it to AP in an email. And if there's an adjustment that needs to be made, obviously I don't know others, but I copy procurement because then there's adjustment to the PO. And then we just say it's approved to pay, like it's good to go. So now in the P2P system, you're saying, because I was hearing that they could upload their invoices through the system, and I'm just like, I think we need to review them first to make sure everything's accurate. I think that was my issue with that portion. But now you're saying you still want them to send them to us, but are we still using that old process then?
No, and for P2P,
I'm a little confused.
So keep in mind, we're currently working two systems. So there's still purchase orders that are in CFS, and we have still occasionally issued purchase orders in CFS where the supplier hasn't onboarded or registered yet, and it was something critical. So we will always have, likely some activity in CFS. So I'm only sharing the information that was conveyed to me by accounts payable, is that they, if it's for a CFSPO, then you can continue doing it the process that you used to do it, emailing it to the org account. But for Procure to Pay, because we are wanting this to be a self-contained system and have that invoice linked to the PO, so that way if auditors come across it, they'll have access to the system, like CSU auditors. They want to be able to have all that documentation for them to not have to then separately request that other departments provide documentation on it. So if you can, if you have that invoice and you have approved it, then you can, reviewed it and made sure it's accurate, then you can attach it to the PO. There's the attachment tab on the purchase order, and send a comment, because there's no flag when we do that process to let AP know there's a pending invoice for payment. And right now, I think a lot of payments have been backed up because there's been some uncertainty on how invoices were going to be submitted to accounts payable. And I know we've heard from requesters as well as suppliers. What is the status of my payment? I need to get paid. So this will help to expedite that process. So the invoice would be uploaded, AP would be notified, and they can then process the voucher and process the payment.
Okay,
Does
so
that make sense?
so we upload it into the system,
Correct. Yeah.
into the attachment area, and then
You can
we have to
send
send a
a
comment
comment
or an
in
information.
P2P, yeah, to those two individuals that we specified. And Julie loaded a QRG that now has this process written down so that way they're aware. And I know somebody asked, are we supposed to alert Tina then? Tina's been out for 3 weeks. And so we kind of have added some supplementary staff to support the AP side because there was a backup of invoices and that haven't been processed and we're at year end. So, and the problem is with P2P, you can't specify an org account because like when you type in the person's name, like it identifies it by individual's name. It doesn't accept it as an email account because it's pulling it who if these individuals are have access in procure to pay. So like if I'm assigning a PO that for some reason didn't get under a workflow trigger rule, I have to assign it to the individual and I can't put an org email because I mean ideally it'd be nice if we could have put the org email account so then it goes to all the AP groups. So if one particular person is out, then that doesn't get stopped because right now that's kind of what happened. Tina was out for 3 weeks on leave, and so we didn't have access to emails that were being directed to her, and this has caused a holdup of some invoices. So we came up with this process so that way two people get notified. They then can alert the AP techs, and we can hopefully get these payments processed sooner.
Okay, and are you going to go over if there needs to be an adjustment to the PO? So if I get something and there's say if it's an overage or an even under, but if there's an overage and so we get their approval, then what are we still doing it the same way? Like I'd send it to Provost, he'd sign it, and then I could upload that and say he has signed off for the increase because each item is a line item now, and so it's a little bit different.
So change requests will be covered in next Thursday's training. That will be a whole other training, and Julie and I will run that training next Thursday. I will send that newsletter out Monday because that's a whole other section, but we do have that hashed out, and that will be next week's training because I know Lisa's had questions on it, you've had questions on it, but we have that figured out. We met with Marina yesterday, and that will be next Thursday's training.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. We have it figured out, and we will train next Thursday, and it will be recorded, and it will be posted to the P2P website.
Yeah, thank you guys. I mean, I know this has been a heavy lift for this campus for all of you guys as well as ourselves. And honestly, there's still some things we're all trying to figure out in this system. And before we advise you guys of steps, we have to go through a verification process. So both Bianca and Julie are doing testing in the site just to make sure what we're telling you is accurate because we've run across some discrepancies in how we were told the system would work. And then when we do something, it's different. And then there's also enhancements that are being made to the system to fine tune it. Like now there's 4 campuses in P2P, and as we see something that we don't particularly like or have a recommendation to make a change that might make things easier, we will inform the core team, to make those requests. And so they have to evaluate it with their consultants that handle the actual system they're creating. And then sometimes they'll send out enhancements that change a process. So there's a lot of moving parts and pieces in the system. So I think overall, you guys have all done a really fantastic job of doing the best you can, coming to us with any questions. Procurement's devoted a lot of resources to the project to make sure you guys have an opportunity for open labs, for training sessions. We're pushing out QRGs, so we're doing our best to support it. And I appreciate all your guys's, patience as we navigate this new process. I know next year things will go more smoothly as we get past this hurdle of year end and different changes and working simultaneously in two systems, but I just wanted to point that out. I see a couple of questions. I think Cami had her hand up first. Cami, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. My question is about the approval of invoices. We upload an invoice and then we make the proper comments to the individuals that have been identified. So it's also telling us that we'll be notified to approve the invoice, which I understood that the DOA approver would need to be approving invoices. So it's still like, while it sounded like it was going to create some automation, it's definitely not really automated at this point because we're still doing behind the scenes steps. So where do you see this going eventually? Do you see it being more automated within P2P or will analysts still be the ones approving invoices? Because we can't just approve it. We don't automatically know that a service has been received or equipment has been delivered, installed, etc.
Yeah, I understand that, Cami, and I'm not going to say there's never going to be instances, especially when you have, an analyst or coordinator who has multiple departments or multiple people that they're purchasing for, I mean, and that was the same with CFS. But the way the system was configured, it was that the requester is the one that's going to get the notification for approval of invoice. If there's an internal process that you need to do to verify, with the, professor or staff member or manager that the goods have been, or the services, I should say, because remember the approval is only for two-way match. It's not on a three-way match. A three-way match. So if it's a goods, you order a computer, the computer is received, all items on that order were received. It will flip to for AP to put in the voucher without there being a requirement for approval. The approval is only for two-way match, which is, typically services, or if there's goods you're ordering that, or a combination of goods and services, and the vendor's going to like do installation at site. So it wouldn't be something that like would technically go through the receiving department. So, so that's why that step is there.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Logan, you have a question?
Yes, my question was kind of related to her. Do you guys recommend us getting the necessary approvals on an invoice, like having our grant PI or just whoever's in charge of approving those purchases, just signing the invoice ahead of time before we upload it to into PT?
Yes, because there's no way for us to set up a workflow for invoice approval that includes, all these different areas. And I know you guys have, more approvals that are required. So certainly that can be an internal process that you guys develop and follow for your areas. Again, because this is a system setup, I'm not going to say it's not still going to trigger you to approve an invoice on a two-way match, but at least you have that backup documentation that's been attached that shows the PI, post award, all those individuals have approved it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? We have about 4 minutes left. Tab, you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I have a few. For receiving, if we're receiving a product and Juan's delivered it, or Mona, and the product is completely wrong, is there a process that we should do to notify so that we can stop this and get the right item?
Yeah, you notify receiving that they should unreceive that item, because if it's wrong, then, oh, I'm sorry, guys, this is a 2-hour training. I thought it was just an hour, so we don't have a time cutoff. Sorry about that. So yeah, so that way, if we have to return the item or notify the vendor and they're going to send us the correct item, we have to jump on that pretty quickly. right? And if you want to, you can also notify AP, just send an email to the AP group and say, please don't process the voucher. But because if it's a punch out supplier, they download the invoice. I can't exactly, I'm not going to say this is 100% accurate because I'm not on the AP side, but they somehow get the invoices directly from those areas to process. So I would say advising them, give them the PO number and say, please don't process the voucher. There is a situation that we've run into. However, if by chance it did get processed, then at that point we'd have to work with the vendor on possibly like doing a credit memo and working that out with AP.
Yeah, I think that's what Becky told me. We had to do a credit memo. And being that we have like a vendor that is constantly sending things incorrectly, that's a lot. A lot of
Well,
work.
yeah, all I can say is maybe look at a different supplier than the one you're using. Because if it's for lab supplies, there's multiple catalogs in P2P, right, for those types of items. So if it's one specific supplier that's causing a lot of headaches, that would be my recommendation.
Okay. And then there's two vendors, Meta and VWR, who are constantly sending invoices to the shopper, not the requester. Is there any way we can fix that?
So we don't have a shopper role in P2P currently. So who's receiving those?
So let's say my boss assigns me a cart, who's the DOA signer, so she can't um, request it. They will automatically send that invoice to her because she initiated the cart.
Mhm. Yeah, even shopper role, and this is why something that I don't really like that role and why we have opted not to use it on our campus. So she must be requester as well as DOA approver because she can only have access to P2P currently if she can only create a requisition if she's a requester, right? So she has the ability to create a cart and then she's assigning it to you. So regardless of whether you're the person that creates the cart or you're the person that assigns or the person that the cart is assigned to, I think it's always going to see the person who created the cart as the original requester because we run
What
into this situation with approvals, um, you know, on that side. Like if the person has this and they assign it to somebody else, can they then also be the DOA approver on that? And I believe we had determined that the answer is no on that.
So my whole problem with this, though, even with ProCard Report, is they're sending the invoice to that person, and then I'm calling VWR for every invoice every month and trying to get it because they won't forward them to me. And
Yeah. Well, the good news is you aren't ordering on ProCard anymore for VWR. It should all be in P2P. So that should alleviate getting the invoices that way. But that's a setup from the supplier. And I know we've had some issues with some suppliers that send invoices to numerous people, but that's not something we really have control over, unfortunately.
okay. And then the other question, sorry, I noticed some of these vendors we're going in doing a rec and then we're getting hit with $100 shipping charge for something. Is that, I mean, and it's getting paid and not questioned. Um, is this something that we can stop or get an approval? Like if a lot of invoices are getting overridden and there's all of a sudden some shipping charges, um, like we need to account for that.
Yeah, thanks for letting us know. We'll have to look into that more. If you can provide some example um, purchase
Medline.
orders with that information, then we can work with it. The contracts, keep in mind the contracts that we have in market or in CSU by P2P, the punch out suppliers, those are handled by the chancellor's office. They have contracts with the chancellor's office, so we would need to escalate it to the chancellor's office if there's discrepancies, if they're charging us, incorrectly for shipping. The contract managers that are at the chancellor's office, we would need to work with them to get assistance and resolution on some of these issues. So send us some examples and we can escalate that.
Yeah, Julie and I did notice that when we were testing production, and we did bring that up to Michael, but we can definitely bring that up again, Marina, when Tabitha sends us
I
those
would
examples.
say, yeah, let me know. And I know the contract managers at the chancellor's office that are assigned to each of the different contracts, and I can reach out to them specifically to look into getting resolution on that.
It's the only Medline I purchased, so Medline is the vendor. And it was something that it wasn't even chemicals to ship it, so it shouldn't have been $100 charge.
Interesting. Yeah, definitely let us know. We can look into those.
I think it's going to be helpful for me to demo now so you guys can see what this looks like, and then we can pivot back to questions if you guys don't mind. Is that okay? Okay. Okay, so what you guys are going to do, and I'll show you to start, but it's not really going to work for me because I don't have a lot in mine, but in your QRG that's attached, it shows you to go to My Purchase Orders in the quick links. So when you go to My Purchase Orders, all of your purchase orders are going to show in this section. So when you have an invoice, you're going to look for the purchase order that you have an invoice for, and you're going to attach it here. So I'll just use this one for an example because this one just turned into a purchase order this morning. So I'll just use this one for an example. So say I have an invoice for this purchase order and I want to attach the invoice here. So I'm going to click on this purchase order. And the system's going a little slow today. So, okay. So this is for t-shirts that I ordered. Okay. So I'm just going to use this as an example. So there's the attachments tab and the comments tab. So I'm going to go to the comments and make sure that you're adding to the PO and not the requisition. So we need to be adding to the purchase order, not the requisition. Thank you, Julie. Okay, so we're going to hit the plus sign. And then this field is going to populate. So I'm going to go here to choose my file. And then I'm going to grab this test invoice here, and I'm gonna attach it. So see here, it's attached, my test invoice. Okay, and then I'm gonna start adding my two people that I need to add. So I'm gonna type in Nashwa's last name is RAFIQ. So I'm gonna search it, and then she pops up. So I'm going to hit this plus sign right here. And she's added now. So I'm going to add Bethany's last name is Davis. So Bethany is here. I'm going to add her. So now Nashwa and Bethany are added. Okay, so you can add a comment here. Okay, so now I have all of my things. I have the comment invoices attached and approved for payment. I have attached my invoice, and I think we discussed this earlier that if you have your own signature process and you want to get your own signatures via Adobe Sign, that's fine. You can do that and attach your signed invoice here. I have Nashwa and Bethany attached, included here. So this is ready to go. You have to make sure that you hit this check mark. If you don't, then it won't send the comment. So we have to make sure we click this. So once we click this, it's done, and it will send an email to Nashua and Bethany. So if this purchase order is a two-way match, which means it's for services, then what's going to happen, are we seeing the test environment?
Yes.
Okay, so if it's a two-way match, what's going to happen is whoever submitted the requisition will get this, which is called the voucher approval. So what happens on the back end is Bethany and Nashua will do what's called a voucher flip. And in P2P, if it's a two-way match, which means receiving didn't receive it because it's services, P2P needs to know that you guys actually received these services. So it's very important that you guys as requesters are looking to see that you guys are making sure and checking to see if you guys have these C numbers in this approval queue. So if you have these, you guys need to be clicking on them here. So I have a voucher that's pending approval, and I put a link to a video in the chat earlier that shows this step. So I have a voucher pending approval. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on it. Okay, so this is voucher that's pending approval. So it's saying that it needs verify received. So this is waiting for my action. So basically what you need to do is you need to make sure that this matches your invoice total. So if it does and everything is correct, then what you need to do is you need to hit approve complete step. If it doesn't, we will cover that in next week's training. I'm not going to cover it right now because there's going to be way too many questions. So if it doesn't, please attend next Thursday's training and we'll cover it then, okay? But right now, I'm just showing that this, yes, $25,812.50, it matches. So I'm going to approve it, okay? So I'm going to hit approve complete step. That's letting AP know that this two-way match is approved to pay. I'm approving it. AP knows that this is approved to pay. When I go back home, now you'll notice this is gone. I just approved that voucher to pay. Okay, so those are attaching an invoice and approving a two-way match voucher. That's the two things I wanted to show you. Okay, now do we have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, and I will make a QRG for the two-way match approval. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm on my cell phone, so I don't see if
It's okay.
anybody's raised their hand, so I apologize. Okay, perfect. Great steps. Thank you for that clarity. I did have that situation last week, and you guys did notify me that I needed to submit the invoice in the comment section. I didn't know that it was going to stop the process, though. Based on the previous videos, it was kind of said that input the invoice in the comment as I looked at the videos, but it did not say that it was going to stop or hold up the process if it was not done. I did put the invoice in the requisition stage, and as it was in the requisition stage, it held up and sat in P2P for a long time before it even went to the PO stage, so the purchase order stage. But my question is that for the requisition stage, everything says it's completed, and it was not communicated to me that there was waiting an invoice or pending an invoice from either the supplier or from myself, that all on my side, everything said things were completed. The PO, how does it move to the PO for the workflow process? How does it move to the PO stage if it's still pending and waiting for something? Because that's what happened. It did not move to a purchase order phase where I would see it to input the invoice. Does that make sense? It just stayed in the requisition stage and it never moved forward.
So when you are looking at your, let me go back in here. So what I would recommend is you need to, so basically you can go into your quick links and you can look at your requisitions. And I know that, so it's a little confusing. So when you see that this says completed, the requisition will, sorry, the system's going slow. So the requisition says completed, and you can look at the workflow steps. So this is completed, and once it completes workflow and all these check marks are done, it will show you the related documents. So see how it says related documents here, and it shows a purchase order? Everything will show all the related documents within P2P. So see how this says there's a related document here and there's a purchase order? This is done. And if I go here, there's a purchase order. So now this means that this is a purchase order. So if I go back to my home, if I go my purchase orders, it will show up in my purchase orders. So a requisition will go through workflow. Once it completes workflow, then it will go to a purchase order, and that's the act of completion. Once it turns into a purchase order, the purchase order is sent to the supplier, and that's what completes the step. The purchase order is the contractual obligation saying, hey, supplier, we are saying we want to buy this product and we are going to pay you within 30 days. Does that make sense, Tamar?
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you for clearing that up. However, the requisition never moved to a purchase order. It sat there for a while. So on my end, I'm thinking everything was completed. It never moved to a purchase order.
Do you have the number?
Well, I had to do a stat. I had to ask you guys what the status is of it. So since then it was moved over and we did complete the invoice to my understanding. But I just wanted to know, moving forward, how do we know this process? And I see what you're saying. I like that you showed me that if it is moved to a purchase order, it'd be in that window area. And that I'm not just thinking things are completed. You know what I'm saying? So I get it.
So Tamar, there could be multiple reasons why it's not processed. Remember the workflow steps. So there's some things that have to be approved by compliance reviewers. So if it's an independent contractor, if it's an IT review, if it's a safety and risk review, it has to go through all those different approvals as well as DOA approver. And then if it's something procurement has to work on, we will never encumber a PO until we have all of our ducks in a row. So if it requires insurance from the supplier that we have to work to get, if it requires a contract that we need to negotiate with a vendor. So, flipping it to the purchase order is the last step where it's like everything's been reviewed, approved, and we've processed any documentation or received any documentation that we need from the supplier. So you should be able to see on that requisition as to where it is in the workflow step and who has it. And if it's gone through all those workflow steps and say it's in procurement, you can certainly reach out to ask for a status to procurement, and we can provide that to you. If it looks like everything's been done and it hasn't moved on to flip a PO, then obviously reach out to the CSU Buy email group. And that way, if it's a system issue where something in that step, it's an automated process. There's like a robot. The way they explained it to us, there's a robot working behind the scenes. So when you hit approve, it flips it to PO, and then it transfers that PO into CFS just for encumbrance purposes. So that would be my recommendation if you run into a situation like that again.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you for that. Just with that, also, when you guys are saying to alleviate the whole situation is putting it in the invoice in the comment section, also through that requisition or that workflow stage, were they waiting for the supplier to input the invoice as well? Or is it would be on my role to do that? Because I saw that email. One of the emails said that the most expedient way is for the supplier to input the invoice.
Yeah, I think you may have came in a little bit after we did this, covered this, but we've discovered that there's numerous issues with the suppliers uploading in the supplier portal. A lot of them don't know how to do it, and they're getting stuck somewhere. And unfortunately, we don't have administrator access to be able to go in and troubleshoot and see where it's at, what step they're missing, to provide any support to suppliers. Supplier is completely 100% managed by the supplier team at the chancellor's office. So campuses don't have a whole lot of hands-on involvement with suppliers. Even a new supplier request that's submitted from our campus still has to go to the chancellor's office, and then they send out the actual invitation to the supplier. They're the ones that review the completed profile that a supplier submits. So for that reason, and I think there's been issues with how that information is then, like, how does AP get notified when there's an invoice that's been submitted through the supplier portal? And then Dina brought up, like, she wants to verify the amount is accurate on the invoice, so she likes to review those before they get submitted to AP for processing. So based on that information and in a discussion I had with other campuses that have gone live with P2P, the recommendation for now, I'm not going to say this is always going to be the process, but the cleanest and easiest way to do it is for the requester to get the invoice and upload it to the PO as an attachment in P2P, and we sent out a QRG on that, and it'll be posted on the CSU by P2P website.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I went through all of this, and now this is all clear for me now. So I thank you. Appreciate it.
Great.
I have a question, and maybe just a suggestion based off what Tamara was bringing up previously. Maybe checking notifications to see how you're being notified along the workflow. I know when I was getting to the voucher approval status, I didn't have that notification setting on. So I didn't see it. I didn't know that that was, an expectation for me to do. So I don't know, maybe just a suggestion on updating or checking your notifications on where you are in the workflow process too. My question for the voucher approval, I'm just wondering how we can get past that step if possible, because if I've already approved or see that the final invoice is the same total as the previous requisition purchase order amount, how I just feel like we're doubling efforts by having to approve the voucher again that services have been rendered when everything seems the same. So is there a way to get through that portion, or how could I do that?
So Andrea, the process step for voucher or for invoice approval, that's something that's automatically set up in the system. So we don't have the ability to turn that off. However, that will only be on a two-way match. So that's typically services. So if it's a three-way match, it will not require that step.
I guess I need to look up the difference between those matches. You're just not understanding those.
Yeah, because I mean, even if you say you're attaching the invoice and you're saying approve for payment, like I know you used to do in CFS, because the system is configured to require a invoice approval on a two-way match, that's not something our campus has the ability to turn off and on.
Okay.
So in the video that I shared, and I am making a QRG, I apologize, I haven't had a chance to do it. You don't have to necessarily get your approval outside of P2P. There is an option to forward your invoice, your voucher approval to Sarah. So you don't have to do it outside. You can just forward it to Sarah and have her approve it in P2P, and it would show in the history tab that Sarah approved it. If you don't want to do double work, that is the act of approving the voucher. So
Okay, so if I did that, if I forwarded it to her in P2P, then it wouldn't go to a voucher approval process for me. Is
no,
that
it
right?
would still, you're forwarding it to Sarah and Sarah is approving it. So you're not having to do it in Adobe Sign outside of P2P. It would show in the history tab that you forwarded it to Sarah and Sarah is approving the voucher. Like she's still
I
Go
okay,
ahead.
sorry. I think my question is how can I get past the last voucher approval
You can't.
process? Okay, that's what, and I'm wondering if maybe that was something again that maybe was just put there because we had assumed that suppliers were going to be able to upload their own invoices, and then that would have been a last minute check or something on our portion. So, okay, good to know. Thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions, guys? Thank you for the tip, Christina. See, look, you're learning the system. Look at you go.
I have a question. Hi, this is Jasmine.
Go ahead.
In for one of my requisitions, I have one of them under a pending status. And when I check the summary of the workflow, it shows that it's actually being held by IT. So it hasn't even moved over to the next workflow. I'm not sure the date on when they received it, but they are informed that the P2P system does inform them that there's a signature required, correct? Or approval process required.
Hi, Jasmine. I can answer that question. Yes, they're aware of that. However, keep in mind, there's a process for them to do IT review. There's multiple steps, so that is not usually a process that happens very quickly. Oftentimes, there's documentation that a supplier is going to need to provide to IT in order for them to do an assessment on that IT acquisition that you've requested. So they will only approve it, the requisition, once it's gone through the solutions consulting process, and every various review that could be information security review, it could be accessible technology review, it could be payment card industry compliance review if it's collecting credit card information or payments are being processed through credit card. So that's why it may sometimes sit in that queue for a while. You can always email the solutions consulting org email account and ask for status, but that's typically why it won't be approved until it's been vetted by their area.
Okay, thank you very much for that
Yeah,
information.
you're welcome. Any other questions? For some reason, I'm unable to open the chat, so I can't see if there's any questions that have been asked in there.
Marina, I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So I submitted a requisition for a medical service payment, and the DOA approver was actually Manuel Barrera, because the account, not the account, but the business unit was a spa
Okay.
unit, and so he's a DOA approver for funds that come out of that account. However, in my workflow, it should be HR approving that. And so my supervisor is not a DOA approver on that spa account. So I guess my question is, until that DOA approver, like until like our department gets, I don't know if they need to get added, because when we did it through CFS, we never had,
grasp approving this medical service payment. But I don't know if because it's for spa employees that it's going through that specific business unit. And so now it's being linked to other grasp DOA approvers, wherein before, they were never notified of this payment because they don't deal with medical service payments for the spa employees. HR does. So how would I
understand that, Erica, however, in this system and with requisitions, so I'm assuming in the past you submitted it on direct pays, and I can't answer if DOA check was done for direct pays, but for requisition submitted to procurement, we always do DOA check. So we would have required a signature from the DOA approver on that. And that's how this system is set up as well, because that could be a potential audit finding to not have a DOA approver approve an expense that's coming out of their budget. So there are a couple ways you could tackle this. So if it requires the approval by HR, in addition to the DOA approver approving it, you can, attach a document with that approval. You could send a comment to whoever is the HR person that needs to approve that. So it's documented in the system that they approved it.
Yeah, so we can add, you can add somebody as, I don't know what the proper wording is, but you can add like another ad hoc. Thank you. Yes, you can do an ad hoc approver. However, like I've had this discussion with Manuel and his team, they don't want to be responsible for approving this requisition, which I totally understand. So I guess because
the only other way to get around it is if you submitted it through your department's chart field string and then did an expenditure transfer to move that expense to their department, because there's no way to work around DOA approver unless they're going to add HR to all of their spa funds. And that would be a discussion that I would imagine HR would need to have with Rosalva Flores, who's the accounting director over spa. And that would be probably a big undertaking. And then they would also receive they'd see everything that gets ordered for spa as their level approver, right? And I don't know that they would want to see all of those requests coming to them. So so that would be my recommendation, is that you guys maybe look at just having those processed out of your department accounts and then doing expenditure transfer after the fact if you absolutely don't, if these people are saying they don't want to approve it, because as a DOA approver, they have to approve it, and it has to go through anytime expenses are paid from spa. It typically, unless it's out of, I know there's like the one fund, I think their general fund maybe in spa that they have to do that out of, but otherwise there's a secondary financial review set up for spa because that's a requirement for grants. So it's always going to go to the post award for review and approval as well.
Okay. Yeah. It's dental and vision premiums for our spa employees is what's being processed. Before was a DP.
Is this something that you guys could process on a credit card?
That I don't know.
If they're able to collect a payment on credit card, then perhaps this is something we can discuss moving to credit card.
Okay.
But you'd still need something official from the department if you're charging it to them to say they approve it from out of their funds.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take back your recommendations to my supervisor and go from there. But at this time, because of that, I have been submitting DPs through the old system because I can't go through CSU buy for this particular service payment. Even though my supplier's in there, again, that DOA approver is something that we can't work around. So yeah, I'll take back your recommendations to my supervisor and see what we come up with. So
okay.
Thank you.
I'm happy to meet with you guys if you have additional questions. So let them know.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Marina, sorry, I know you can't open the chat. I was just wondering if there was an area to, just following up with my question, is there an area that says the difference between the 2 and 3-way matches?
So a three-way match will require receiving. That's always going to be for goods. So, if it's a tangible item that's being delivered to the receiving department and then they put it in the system as a receipt and the quantity matches the quantity being invoiced, then that will just move over to payment and not require, once the invoice is received, will not require a requester to approve the invoice. So for the two-way match, that would be services, or if there's, an order where it's a combination of goods and services. So say you're ordering furniture, that furniture typically is not going to go through receiving because it's going to be delivered to this, location where the furniture is going to be installed. So that would be what would require a two-way match.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I can add that to the transitioning to P2P guide, Marina.
Great. I know everybody has, time restrictions and a lot of duties that they have to do, but I do recommend, reviewing the documentation we have on the CSU by P2P site. The comprehensive guide has a lot of really good information. We always post recordings. I know sometimes it's hard to watch a 2-hour recording, but we also have quick reference or what are those called? The short videos, short tutorial videos that are for specific steps. We have the quick reference guides that, you guys I'm sure have seen. So I would certainly recommend, using those resources that are available to you guys so you don't get stuck or get frustrated. Just wanted to make everybody aware that that information is out. We've tried to compile and provide, and we are still working on a lot of that information as well. So that way you guys have a good amount of tools and resources available to you for this system. Probably more than I think any other campus implementation has provided. Any other questions?
So, Andrea, I just put it in the chat. So it covers three-way match, but I'll expand to it. It's on page 5 of the transitioning to P2P guide. But I'll expand on it, but it's on page 5. It covers three-way match, but not two-way match. So that'll give you three-way match, but I'll update the guide to cover two-way match.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'll have this video posted as soon as it downloads and the QRG and the PowerPoint, so it'll be on the website like this afternoon. Any other questions? I know it was a lot. Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll give you some time back. Much needed time.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great 3-day weekend. Stay
Thank
cool.
you.
Bye.
Bye.